Hello, folks. Welcome to this edition of Al's Joint. I'll be joined today by my co-host Dennis Painter as we delve into the total chaos coming out of Washington, D.C. and this Trump administration as he tries to take us in a war with Venezuela. So as we pay homage to Edwin Starr and war, what is it good for? Let's take the gloves off and let's get at it. Well, Brother Painter, here we are again. Another week of controversy, another week of news out of this crazy administration.
Well, it seems to be getting worse. And what's developing now, is actually not only affecting lives, but people's lives are being eliminated. And that is a horrible thing.
Agreed. Now, before we jump into some of the agenda items we have, some of the craziness is going on, I've been getting a lot of comments and responses to our previous podcast saying, who the hell are these guys? What makes them think they know anything about the working class? So I thought we'd take a couple of minutes just to kind of introduce ourselves. I don't think we've done that before. So if you want to take a couple of minutes and let folks know what created Dennis Painter, what made Dennis Painter the trade unionist he became, and the person who seeks social justice.
Well, that's really a long story, so I'm going to try to condense it down. But, I'm from Virginia, and social justice was not taught in Virginia or the South. Now, racism was taught, but not social justice. How did I get involved with social justice? And I go back to my grandfather. My grandfather was, according to my grandmother, part Indian. And if you look at pictures of him, he looked totally purebred Indian, and his mother did too. In the South, where racism was vampant, you didn't talk about that. And my grandfather never talked about being an Indian. My grandmother's the one that told me. But my grandfather was the first one that stood up for me. I worked with him one day. He worked farms. He was a tenant farmer. He didn't have much of an education. Tenant farmer, I remember, paid him $25 a week for working 5.5 days a week. And I helped my grandfather bale hay one day, all day long. And the farmer, being the cheap person he was, at the end of the day, dug into his pocket and handed me a dime for working all day long. And my grandfather was furious because of the way the farmer treated me. I worked all day long, and that's the best he could do. So that's always stood out for me. And then if you go from there, I worked farms when I was a teenager. I went to school, get off the school bus, grab something to eat, change clothes, and go work on the farms. And one particular farm, had dairy cattle, and you have to milk cattle twice a day, 7 days a week. And I'd been there for a while, and the owner's son wanted to know if I would work Sundays, which was the only day I had off. And I told him, sure, I'll work Sunday, but I want $1 an hour for working on Sunday because I was getting 65 cents an hour for my other hours. And he told me, is that if that's the way you feel, you don't have any business being here. And I said, okay. And I walked off the job that day. Now, I went on to a better job, paid more than double what I was making. So I thought, well, I did okay. After I graduated from high school, I went to work in construction first and then ended up in a factory. And the needles and trades came along and started a campaign. And the factory had over 600 people in it. I didn't know anything about unions. Went to union meetings, asked a lot of questions. And at first they thought I was a plant. They thought, I was just there to, create problems. But I just didn't know. And once I had my questions answered, I joined the movement. Unfortunately, when we went to the election, we lost. A couple of years later, I went to work in another factory on my own. I didn't get fired from the first one. I thought it was. And we got the union in. Then the first union involvement I had in the first factory, my wife told me, she said, you got to get out of that because you're going to get fired. And I told her I would rather at 60 look back and say I tried then look back and say, I wished I had tried. And that's to make my life better. Now, the big issue for me was respect. And the same thing happened in the second factory, different union. We happened to win that one. At 25 years old, I was elected to be on the first negotiating committee, and later, after the contract was signed, elected to be the first president of the local. So I worked in factories for 9.5 years, and then the union offered me a job. So I come from a working class background, and I've worked. I know what it's like for the boss to have a thumb on me. I know what it's like to be disrespected. I had one supervisor tell me, because I wanted to bid off these certain lines because they were nasty, dirty, and I had seniority. He said, "You don't get off of them if you're good at it." And he said, "You're not getting off." And so it told me that seniority and all of that meant nothing, that they would take advantage of you. So that's why I got involved in the union initially. Then I went to work for the United Electrical Radio Machine Workers of America and spent almost 40 years working for them, trying to help workers achieve justice, good wages, good benefits, but also to teach them that it's okay to stand up against the boss. It's okay to say, no, I'm not going to do that. It's okay to have some say inside that facility, protect your self-respect is okay. And I believed in it. I believe in it today. That's why I'm on this podcast. I believe that the working people of this country deserve better.
Wow, that's a lot of history in a short period of time. I started out in 1976 as a steward with 1199P in Pennsylvania in a nursing home, and ended up spending 50 years. Next year will be 50 years in the labor movement, 40 of those years as staff. And I've, like you, worked in at least a dozen states. I don't know how many cities, it's too hard to count, right? But
Right.
we represented tens of thousands of workers. And I've told folks before in red states, blue states, red cities, blue cities, red counties, blue counties, all over. So the fight has always been the same. How do we make sure that the lower and middle class folks get a chance to live the American dream? Because growing up, my father did nearly 30 years in open hearth and in the Homestead Steel Mill. My mother was a stay-at-home mother. But I read up on at the turn of the century how billionaires would make folks and kids work in coal mines and work in factories 7 days a week, no days off. If you got hurt or you got sick, you were just off of work until you got healthy. And there's a song out called I Owe My Soul to the Company Store, which is interesting because that's exactly what happened. You were forced to buy everything, all your goods and supplies from the company-owned store. And you probably ended up owing by the time you retired, if you ever got a chance to retire, thousands of dollars to the company that you work for because you bought everything on credit. That's all you could afford. And I believe that the labor movement allowed for folks to fight back. So every year that I spent in the labor movement, and I'm supposed to be retired, but I'm still involved in the labor movement. Every year that I look back was worth it. Every fight was worth it. I just hope that people don't forget that right now you have billionaires telling you to continue fighting your neighbor instead of looking at what they're ripping us off for.
Absolutely. Very well said. The lessons, hopefully, that you left behind and I left behind. I know between us, we've negotiated hundreds of contracts for the benefit of the working class, but we also tried to train people and leave something behind. I believe firmly that we should leave this earth better than we found it. And I feel like you've done that through your work. I feel like I've done that through my work. We've tried to make this place a better place to live and to help people out. We're both retired, but hopefully those that we taught will pass it forward and pass it on and teach others to do the same.
I only hope so. Let's jump into this Trump's administration's attempt to continue to wreak havoc on this country, divide this country, and destroy our Constitution from within. I know he continues to bomb rowboats and little speedboats in Venezuela and to convince us that he's doing this to protect us.
Well, I can tell you right now, and he's been saying that there's no boats out there on the water anymore because he's been bombing. Every redneck MAGA fan out there knows, I'm saying redneck fisherman knows that you ain't gonna keep them off the water if they're really fishing. He's full of them, so he being Trump, it's not true. And I mean, he's saying that he's stopping the fentanyl coming into the United States. That's not so. He's not doing that. And he saved each boat he bombed, he saved 25,000 lives. Well, he has no way of confirming one, that there was any drugs on that boat. Two, that the people that were killed, all of them knew if there were drugs on that boat. And three, I mean, the simple, if there was any evidence or anyone to testify, he sunk it to the bottom of the ocean. So there's no way to find out. Now, he said on his podcast, oh, you could see drugs just floating across the water in bags. He showed a film. Well, you couldn't see anything floating across the water. He's full of crap. Majority of the fentanyl coming into this country is coming from Mexico, and it's being brought in by Americans as a business. And people shouldn't lose focus of that. There's been a military buildup off the coast of Venezuela for the last 2.5, 3 months. Air carriers and boats, bombers, and Marines being ready to invade that country. And the bombing of the boats was to try to get that country to react so they had a reason to invade. They're not going to wait for a reason anymore. I think they're going to go ahead and invade. And unfortunately, our sons and daughters and grandsons and granddaughters are going to lose their lives based off of Trump's decision. He does not like the leader in Venezuela. He wants to dethrone or get rid of him and have an administration that he wants in there. And that's the wrong place for our sons and daughters to be killed. Where are we any different than Putin invading Ukraine if we allow that to happen?
Agreed. I just don't understand. And when you think about it, he tells us that, like you said, there were bags of drugs floating on the water. The explosion that happened from those boats, you're not going to have no bags of floating left. Every body was disintegrated. Wouldn't it be in his best interest and our best interest as a country to capture one of those boats and say, hey, we've captured these boats. Now, if they end up firing on our folks, then we know what's going on, and you could justify firing back. But you can't justify blowing little boats out of the water and thinking that are thousands of miles away from our shores. There's no way in the world they can make it anywhere close to us in those boats. Where they got to refuel, they got to go somewhere else. It makes no sense what he's saying, but people won't look at that because right now they turn a blind eye to everything he's doing. He tears down half of the White House, so what? He throws legal Americans in jail, so what? What the farmers are arguing that, oh, he's going to buy beef from Argentina. Everything else he's done is okay, but now they're in an uproar because he's buying beef from Argentina. You voted for him. This is what you voted for. You voted for that man to come in and do that. And they still vote for him again.
Well, here's the thing, going back to Venezuela, okay? I have a boat, not a huge boat, some close to the size that I saw that was blown up. And they're what they call open hull boats, okay? But meaning you have to have room to move around when you go fishing. You know, you can't have a closed hull boat and go fishing. And they're just blowing them up. And it's murder. Justice Supreme Court John Roberts stated, and I'm gonna quote him, the rule of law is endangered. And when you go out on open waters and you ignore the rule of law and just blow people up without having any evidence, you're just killing people. It's murder. Now, to your point, it makes more sense to capture every single one of those boats because the real people, the boss of the drug trade, aren't on those boats. It makes more sense to capture them, question them, and then put an end to whoever's controlling the drugs themselves. All this math doesn't add up. Trump's saying by blowing up the boats, he's saving 25,000 lives for each boat. Well, it's 14 boats. Well, the math does not work because number one, most of the fentanyl is coming from Mexico. Number two, the Center for Controlled Disease Prevention, between May of 2024 and May of 2025, there were 73,000 overdose deaths from fentanyl. So if most of the drugs, fentanyl is coming from Mexico, all right, then you can logically think that most of those deaths were attributed to drugs coming across the border from Mexico and not Venezuela. And people need to look at this and do the math and do their own research. I mean, when you have a Supreme Court justice who's very conservative, and I don't like his decision stuff, saying the rule of law is endangered, that's pretty serious. Trump is ignoring the open seas. There's laws that govern that. He's starting a war and provocating countries where there's no need to. From the time he's come into office, he said, I'm the one that can settle the Ukraine Russian dispute. I'm the settler. I'm the great negotiator. Blah blah blah. He's done nothing but create havoc, problems, and start wars with people. Economic wars, wars between class wars. He's done nothing but destroy it. And on top of that, even though he spent hours upon hours with Putin, he hasn't been able to settle the Ukraine-Russia situation.
Well, but he did settle the dispute between Xenia, Ohio and Springfield, Ohio with the cats and the dogs, right? He's claiming every dispute in the world he's settled, right? So hate to ridicule him. Here's the scary part to me, and I hope that folks take time to think about this. Trump is not smart enough to sit down and figure out what Venezuela represents to us strategically. He's not. He doesn't have the mental capacity to do any of that. Even when he was young in his prime, let alone now that he's old and senile. And we'll get to that a little later. So the real question is, who's wagging the dog? What's in it for them? Who's going to send our young men and women to die? That's what we better find out. It's not Trump. Like I say, he doesn't have the mental capacity to do any of it. If you sat him down privately and asked him why, he wouldn't have a clue on how to answer you. So there are other folks here that are directing this, that has him on strings, and that's who is in danger in our country. So people better ask that question: who's really behind this plot to push us into war with Venezuela?
I agree with you 100% that it's being orchestrated by those that can make money off the invasion. I mean, I hate to say it, but that's the way I see it. And unfortunately, and I don't like to say it this way, but it's our sons, our daughters, our grandsons and granddaughters that are going to lose their lives because someone wants the minerals out of Venezuela. And they're going to be told that it's to save America. War is horrible in any aspect. And, I hope that everyone, including the MAGA people, look at their children and their grandchildren and say, I don't want my son or my daughter or my grandson and my granddaughter going down to Venezuela and be killed over fictitious reason.
It used to be, you may remember, I'm sure you do, that they started wars when the economy was struggling because wars would stimulate the economy, believe it or not. I hope that's not the case as we transition this discussion into the state of the economy, because nothing that Trump promised is happening. No
Right.
prices are going down. The price of oil up. The price of food is sky high. Um, the unemployment rate is high. The only reason it looks like it's bad but not terrible is because people stop looking for jobs. So they're no longer on the registers, right? However, the economy's, I think it's going to get worse, much worse before it starts to, if it ever starts to get better under this administration. But you have all these outliers, right? And all of a sudden they're saying we want to pick a war with Venezuela. Trump now is over in Asia doing a tour where he looks like he's out of place. So he's set on these agreements with Japan or South Korea, but our economy is tanking.
Well, that's true. And if you look at the unemployment rate has gone up from a year ago, 395,000 more people are unemployed than they were a year ago. I call it underreporting on unemployment. There's probably more than that. They just ran out of unemployment. The unemployment rate is now at 4.3%. Okay. And it's slated to get higher. The inflation rate is creeping up. The food prices, as you pointed out, are getting higher. And in particular, you take a look at what he's doing with Argentina and the beef, and I'm laying the tariffs into this as part of the economy. The economy is being destroyed by the tariffs. We got farmers in Ohio on Facebook. Now, imagine a farmer who plants corn and soybeans and all that getting on Facebook and saying, this is a bunch of crap. Not only am I losing money, I'm losing my main customers because of the tariffs. Those countries are going elsewhere and they cannot sell their product. And then if you go out west and you look at the people that raise cattle and make a living off selling beef, and then look at what Trump is doing. He's going to Argentina, cutting a $40 billion deal to supply beef to the United States of America and undercutting those ranchers. They're going to go bankrupt. Then what's going to happen? Who's going to buy the land? Corporate America. That's who's going to buy it.
They
Raise the
buy it
tariff
all. They could take it over.
and mine it, not have any rules or regulations. Yeah, they can do that too. Yes, absolutely. So my electric bill since last year has gone up almost 46% since last year. The rate, and it's the kilowatt rate. It's not the usage. Every aspect of living that I see has gone up. Now, gas prices essentially they up and down, but he promised them that it would be under $2. That has not happened. Nothing, in the as far as economics has he delivered on.
As of November 1st, when folks go on the exchange for the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, and they start seeing what those premiums are costing them, that's going to, I have no clue because we've never been through anything like this before, right? But you're talking about instead of having a gradual increase of the cost of premiums for health insurance, where you kind of absorb that year to year, now you're going to get hit with it all at once. And you know as well as I do, if you bargain contracts, the Affordable Care Act was put in place, those heavy spikes were gone. We didn't experience those anymore. Yeah, of course, insurance went up slowly, but nowhere near what it was before the Affordable Care Act, where we were looking at 28, 38% jumps every year in bargaining. And what Affordable Care Act did was it opened the marketplace up. It made it more competitive, and folks had to keep the rates down. And with the government subsidizing folks, it was able to kind of control it. All that's going to be gone through Trump and the shutdown. And they want that because the insurance companies lobbied them to get rid of that. They don't care if millions of people die over the next 10 years. They don't care. That's not their business. They're in the business to make money. And they're going to take away every obstacle they can to be able to make more money.
Well, I think I told you this before. I was working up in Cleveland on a campaign with a group of workers, and I met with a person that actually he was a representative of an insurance company. I won't name it, but it's a prominent insurance company in this country. And the individual had been in the labor movement himself and had been the president of his local auto company up there. He moved on and went into got hired as an insurance agent. And he told me this. He said, I'm going to tell you, if you repeat it, I'm going to call you a liar. But he said, the insurance company is not there to provide insurance. They're there to make money. And he told me this. He said, a certain percentage of all claims get kicked out. And he said, now there's some people that will fight it, and then the insurance company will have to pay it. But there's people out there that won't fight it. And that's extra money for the insurance company. He told me that's what they do. And on top of this, people need to think, what's the other step? Okay, the other step to this is people without insurance, and that doesn't mean they're not going to have health problems. What happens? We still got to have to go to the hospital, still have to have health care of some type. They're going to need help somewhere. Is that going to increase the state taxes, county taxes to provide that? Because they're going to need that. If I take all my money to provide health care, but I don't have enough for rent, then social services is going to step in. Or we're going to go back to the period that you were talking about, is I'm going to owe my soul. I always looked at it like this, Al. Companies want to give you just enough money. It's like hanging on the cliff by your fingernails, just to keep you hanging on so you don't quit. That's all the amount of money they want to give you. They don't want to give you any more. They don't want you at the top of the mountain. They want you hanging on that cliff.
Some people believe that insurance companies want you to get well. They don't. For you to get well, they have to pay for that. They would prefer for you to die. They factor all that in. I'll never forget, I went to a training for pensions, not for health insurance, right? And I went to this training as act like I was part of a management team. And we sat through that whole presentation. And what the bean counter said was that they factor in that they set the age for a pension at a high enough rate where when people retire, they expect a certain percentage of people to die without them having to fulfill their pension requirement payments to them.
Right.
The vast majority of folks choose no beneficiary because they look at it, they talk about it with their spouse if they have one at the time, and they say, hey, we can get more money right now. Let's not, put it off. I left that meeting knowing that the powers that be aren't looking out for you. The bottom line is how much money they can make, and that the health insurance industry is the same way. They don't want to treat you. They rather you not have insurance and die, because that gives them more money. There's all this, the more sick people that die, the less sick people are making claims on insurance.
I agree with that 100%. That's been my experience. And the same with pension. I mean, I've been in enough negotiations trying to improve pensions for the working class and seeing that, I mean, they put the figures out there for you. And if you have enough, intelligence to go through it, you'll see that they have a certain percentage that's going to die and never collect.
Now, we have some upcoming elections we should touch on there. I think they're important to segue into the midterms. We have the New York mayoral race with Como and Mandani. They're both Democrats. Como refused to drop out of the race. He has the support of the old established Democratic Party. I just think that the people are starting to say, hey, your way didn't work. You old timers need to step aside and let the next wave of folks come in and see if they can give it a try. I think the establishment is fighting back, but I think that we'll see a change in New York on how they perceive the old Democratic Party versus the new Democratic Party in this upcoming election. In New Jersey, the governor's race between Nikki Sherrill, the Democrat, and I think it's Citarelli, the Republican. I think she has about a 10-point lead there. It's closed a little bit, but I think New Jersey will vote her in. New Jersey, I looked at the history there. They very seldom vote Democrat, Democrat, Republican, Republican. They've been alternating for years now, right? But in this case, I think that this will be a good kind of a microcosm on what the country's feeling about Donald Trump and this administration. The third race is in Virginia with Sponberger, the Democrat, and Earl, the Republican, both women. And I think that'll be an interesting race. It'll be interesting to see.
It will be interesting.
I just want to remind folks how important it is to get out to vote. In Pennsylvania, I know they're trying to pull a hokey doke. Right now, they kind of retain judges like on 10-year terms, so there's not as much turnover, but the Republicans in Pennsylvania are trying to get folks to change that format, right? You got to have a race every so often. So if you're the sitting judge, you got to go out and politic and campaign. So folks need to look at that race and make sure they vote yes on the term limit. So I think they're calling it the retention election or mandate. So make sure if you're in Pennsylvania, you're voting yes to make sure they continue retaining judges.
I agree. Everyone should vote. I'm not telling people how to vote, but they should vote. But along that line, and it kind of goes into our economic discussion that we were having earlier, of the last 11 recessions in the United States since 1953 to 2020, 10 of those recessions, Republicans were in office, and they did more damage to our economy than the Democrats. One of those recessions, a Democrat was in office. So people should think about that and look at what's going on now. I mean, our economy is not in the best shape that it's ever been. The deficits continue to rise, regardless of what Trump says. People in this country are losing jobs. Employers are saying we're not going to invest in new jobs in this country. So when you say get out and vote, you're voting for your own job. You're voting for your own pocketbook. Go out and do that. Don't vote for empty promises. Vote for yourself.
I've been in the process of reading this book, Nobody's Girl. So by Virginia Roberts Guthrie, one of the Epstein victims. And to say that I'm saddened, I'm hurt, I'm angry, all those things. You read what these young girls went through. It was, to me, was a glorified prostitution pimp scenario. It wasn't any more than that. It was taking advantage of young girls, twisting them, and in some cases, young boys, using them, abusing them, raping them, made them part of a pedophile ring. If folks don't get a chance to read it, they should at least read the excerpts from the book. It'll open your eyes.
The thing about it, even though she got a large multi-million-dollar settlement, she ended up killing herself at age 41. That speaks to not just what she went through at the time, but the scars that are left throughout her lifetime. And so it's sad in so many ways. So that bothers me. But I called my representative, who, I live in a red state in Ohio, Representative Mike Turner. I called his office. I didn't speak to him directly. I spoke to one of his aides, which is not unusual. And I said, look, I want to know why Mike Turner has not voted to release the Epstein files. So I started getting this song and dance about how they released 1,000 pages. I said, I didn't ask you that. I asked you, why haven't they released all of the files, which is tens of thousands of pages, and the videos? Why hasn't Mike Turner voted to release those? And so he said, well, there's been 1,000 pages released. I said, I did not ask you that. I asked you why he is blocking the release of the remaining files and videos. He said, I've answered your question. Good day. And he hung up on me. So I'm going to do a follow-up letter saying, look, you, Mike Turner, represent, the people in Ohio. Your aide, I asked a difficult question, I understand that, hung up on me. I want an answer. Why haven't you voted to release those files? All of them, unredacted. That's something that I've done. I'm going to be trying to get in touch with our House Representative Husted and Marino and follow up on those with and see what they're going to say. And I'm sure they're going to say the same thing. Oh, there's 1,000 pages released. That doesn't answer the question. Why haven't you voted to release all of it?
Well, they've circled a wagon, right? They've circled a wagon to protect the pedophiles. And that's why it's so important for folks to read and do their own research. I think that book is important. In chapter 15, she writes that all the girls in Epstein's household, in that circle, that pedophile circle, knew that a woman in her early 20s married one of the men in his social circle. So that gave those young girls the impression that they were being prostituted out for a chance to become Melania Trump in a nutshell, right? You could be this person too, married to a billionaire, if you stay in this pedophile prostitution circle that we've created.
All of those ladies have been abused and have scars. And I'm going to go back to what we've said many times. If you are not voting to release those files, then you're an accomplice to the crime. They are endorsing that type of criminal action against our children by not voting to release those files. As a country, we're missing the moral issue. It's not a political issue, it's a moral issue. When I say we, Mike Turner, my representative, is missing the issue. It's the issue of protecting our children, in Ohio from pedophiles, not endorsing that activity, which I believe Mike Turner is doing by not voting. And I believe every person who does not vote to release those files is endorsing crimes against children.
It just angers me when I look at these pictures of a young Virginia Roberts Guthrie and think that they targeted that young woman like they did the other dozens and dozens of young girls and sometimes boys. And I wonder what the hell Republicans are thinking. What makes the MAGA base think that it's okay? And would they allow their 12, 13, 14-year-old daughter or granddaughter or little sister to be put in such a position? Would they think that it's okay for pedophiles to take advantage of them? That's the question I want to ask, because to me, we have to do something. So it looks like we've come to the end of another episode. We have a lot of work to do, a lot of fighting we have left to do. As always, it's my pleasure to have these discussions with you. Hopefully next week, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that we might have some good news. Maybe the government will reopen. Maybe Obamacare will still be in place. But if not, we'll be ready to tackle it as always. All right, take care, my brother.
All right, there we talk again.
Well, folks, we come to the end of another episode. I want to thank everybody for watching. Please don't forget to hit share, like, and subscribe. It's free. And also leave your comments below. I want to know what you're thinking. And you've heard it. Unless you're a far right-wing MAGA nut, I don't give a damn what you're thinking. But join me next Friday as we continue to fight to keep this country out of the hands of those far right-wing nuts. Peace.
Please be a part of protecting our Constitution. Take a stand and sign the petition now through the link in our description.